like to call the meeting to order. Thank you. We'll start with roll call, starting on my left.
Mildred Olay.
Hiroshiato, Director, District 5.
Jeffrey McAnalloy.
Claire Wilson, Director, District 2.
Carol Gregory, Director, District 4.
Tammy Campbell, Superintendent.
Thank you. You all rise if you are able to, and join me while Federal Way High School JROTC does the presentation of colors, please. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was just saying if you were paying attention. You were. Good evening, and I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. And I think, as always, one of the things that we like to do is celebrate scholars and families in our community. And so we just do a couple quick things before we do that. So the first thing I'd like to do is ask for a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, please.
I move that the Board of Education approve the meeting agenda of January 9th, 2018 as submitted.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the required approvals agenda.
I move that the Board of Education approve the required approvals agenda of January 9th, 2018 as submitted.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. Now, why most of you are sitting out there is for our good news announcements. So while Superintendent Campbell and I come down to the front, we will get ready.
So we actually have one bit of business before we do good news announcements, and I'd like to invite Tim Garshaw to come forward, who is the Executive Director of the Washington State School Board Directors.
Hello. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Board. I wanted to come to extend my gratitude to one of your own. Claire Wilson, your chair, hired me as Executive Director of WASDA, served tirelessly on the board, and was a strong voice, probably the strongest voice that I have met so far of school directors when it comes to making sure that each and every scholar gets what they need. So she is responsible for instilling that value in me, and she started in motion on the WASDA board a revision of our vision, mission, and our goals to work an equity thread through all of that, and the legacy that she leaves behind for WASDA is immeasurable. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge her commitment to WASDA, the Federal Way School District, and the entire state of Washington, representing 295 districts, 1,477 elected officials, and 1.1 million students. So, with gratitude, thanks, boss.
We're going to put you out and put you on.
Okay.
Way to go, Claire.
So the Math Fall Classic is designed to reward excellence in mathematics. The Classic was held on November 11, 2017, and Thomas Jefferson High School students placed very well in the team contests. Thomas Jefferson teams placed first in the 11th, 12th grade division and second in the 9th, 10th grade division. Scholars, when I call your names, please come forward to be recognized. Zach Botts. Aiden Narayanan. Piers Hansen. Amy Holden. Richard Chung. Nick Kim. Austin Kim. And Angela Yu. This effort is in direct support of the district's strategic plan, Goal 4, content area competency, mastery of all subjects. Congratulations, math scholars, on your achievements in the competition. We are all very proud of you.
Way to go, mathematicians.
We're so proud of Thomas Jefferson High School scholar Nick Kim for placing first in the Math is Cool state finals, which occurred on November 18th, 2017. Nick, please come forward. Yeah.
Way to go. If you ever need some help, I can do backup coaching.
Math is Cool competitions include both individual and team efforts. Individual events include completion of open-ended and multiple choice problem sets focused on mental math and an individual test. This effort is in direct support of the district's strategic plan Goal 4, content area competence, mastery of all subjects. Congratulations, Nick, on your math accomplishments.
The Reflections Program is a national PTA and Washington State PTA cultural arts competition. The purpose of this program is to provide an opportunity for students to use their creative talents by expressing themselves through their original work. From the neighborhood, which is where I live, we are proud of our Wildwood scholars who won in the following categories: primary visual arts, primary choreography, special artist visual arts, intermediate visual arts. I now call our scholars forward to be recognized and read the name of their art students as well as their principal. Leon Crawford, The Maze of Imagination Land. Sarah Dukley, The Happy. Kevin Talk, Power Rangers. Zoe Egas, Pick It Up. Emma Zerby Porch, In Reach. Angela Gonzalez Magana, My Goals. Pauline Cordova Ibarra, Let It Go. Michelle Jacqueline, Learning How to Fly. Bella Barber, I Love Life. Scholars, we are proud of your dedication to the arts as you continue to become active learners, engaged, empowered, critical thinkers, Goal 3 of our strategic plan. Keep up the good work.
Maybe you're in the back there. There we go. Wildwood Scholars.
On December 16th, 2017, our community united as one and volunteered at the 3rd Annual Federal Way Cares for Kids Holiday Gift Giving event. Federal Way Cares for Kids is a community coalition that coordinates the talents, resources, and skills of local organizations and individuals to maximize support received by kids and families of Federal Way schools in direct support of Strategic Plan Goal 2, Whole Child, Thriving, Confident, Responsible Individuals. We would like to recognize the following Federal Way Cares for Kids board members and committee leads. Please come forward when I call your name. Chief Andy Wong, Federal Way Police Department. Tracy Oster, Communities and Schools of Federal Way. Kevin Crossan, South King Fire and Rescue. Susan Moss, Life and Health Chiropractic. Wendy McIntosh, Community Volunteer. Lindsay Sperry, Federal Way Police Department. Misty Lara, Grace Church. Jennifer Youngblood, Communities and Schools of Federal Way. Cassie Swenson, Federal Way Public Schools. Amy Longenecker, Community Volunteer. And Janice Seibenailer, Community Volunteer. This year, almost 275 families received support totaling over 1,000 children. Volunteers partnered with parents to complete holiday shopping for their children, and others enjoyed holiday-themed arts and crafts. Thank you to our community partners for providing essential support to our scholars and families during the holidays. Thank you all.
Okay, Ashley?
Good evening. I'm Ashley Barker. I'm the principal at Federal Way Open Doors, where we serve young people 16 to 21, re-engaging in their education to earn high school diploma. We have graduated many young people to date, and we are busy working hard to make sure our schedules fit up with theirs. They're very busy and hope to come to the school board. But tonight, we would like to recognize 2 graduates from our program who have persisted to graduation. Under Goal 5 of our strategic plan, we are so very proud of them and look forward to recognizing this great achievement in partnership with their families here tonight. First, I'll read the biographies of our graduates, and after I've read the biographies, they will then be called up individually to receive their diploma. First, we have Darius Bourne. Darius came to us at Open Doors in June 2017. He, from the beginning, told us that he was a leader. He stepped in to assist with our advisories and supported other students right from the beginning. It was through the relationships he built at Open Doors that Darius decided to pursue his dream of attending Eastern Washington University, and he'll be attending this spring quarter. He'll be studying accounting. He navigated the financial aid system, which we know is sometimes harder than some of those high school classes, and housing also. And with the help of our on-site partner, Seattle Education Access, Darius plans on starting at Eastern and walking on this fall with the football team. He has so many great things that he'll accomplish, and we just can't wait to see what Darius does. Okay, next, we have Kevin Clay. Kevin Clay started in September of 2017. He was absolutely motivated to graduate and move on to his next step right from meeting him. Kevin, too, has applied to Eastern Washington University and Green River as a backup. There, he'll be studying athletic training, sports medicine, and/or business, or all of the above. Kevin wants to set a strong example for his younger sister and always has a smile on his face. And you'll appreciate this. He had enough courage to be asked to go door to door knocking in the Twin Lakes neighborhood with my little doggy and some door hangers. And he went to go promote our bond, which I'm sure that's why we passed it. We know and are excited to watch what Kevin will do in the future. Now will each graduate come forward individually, first with Darius and then with Kevin, to receive your diploma.
That's always the best part. I will tell you, as you're leaving, the pictures are on our Federal Way Public Schools website, and also you'll find them on Twitter, and you'll also find them on Facebook. So keep your eyes out. So, all righty. With that, we will move forward with legislative liaison update. Carol?
There we go.
Wait till the crowd.
There was a student that didn't get called up. Her name is Ann Tran.
Anne, where are you? Come forward, please. I think we forgot something very important. Anne's from
Wildwood.
Anne's from one of the the Wildwood group. How could we have forgotten?
I must have forgotten. I'm sorry. I did. Hers is the ballerina. Michael. We got another one?
Okay, thank you all. Director Gregory.
Well, as we all know, we're starting another legislative session, and I wish I could tell you that we had some new issues, but we're pretty much at the same old, and that is the whole issue of education funding. We'll be watching that very closely from our district in particular, and we'll be particularly watching a House Bill 2366 that has been introduced by Representative Reeves from our district to change the formula to increase what federal way schools are receiving under the regionalization factor. And instead of going into the whole thing, let me just very briefly tell you, we have been, in my opinion, disenfranchised by this factor in that we are not being funded at the level of our neighbors. So therefore, being able to compete for things like hiring teachers and so forth, we have less money. And so we're going to argue through the work of our legislators for a change in that so that we are equal to our neighbors and can compete equally. The other thing I'll mention tonight in particular is special education. Traditionally, I guess is the way to say it, the legislature has underfunded special education, both actually at the state and federal levels. And this is becoming an increasing problem for school districts. And we are part of a major push to try to get some resolution on that. It affects us greatly financially, and we just can't afford to have those kinds of things go unfunded when in fact McCleary was to have resolved many of these issues. And I'm not saying that to be negative necessarily, because when you make the massive change that we've made, there are going to be those things that fall through the cracks. Unfortunately, we're being affected by that as much or more than many school districts, and so we will be paying particular attention to those. There are others that we'll be bringing up as the session goes on, such as homelessness and other issues that directly affect us as well. But I thought for tonight I would focus on those two. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything other board members like to add? Time for public comment, and if you would like to make public comment, there's blue sheets on the table as you enter in, and you can do that at any point during the meeting and pass it up front, and we'll make sure that we include you. And we have one right now public comment tonight, and that is Gary Robertson speaking on the EP&O levy.
Before I start my speech, I have a short intro. As everyone knows, I write articles mostly on education for the Federal Way Mirror. And as Dr. Campbell knows, I'm a pretty good writer, but I have to give credit where credit is due, and that is to our board president, Claire Wilson, because she wrote an outstanding article on this subject, and she set the bar pretty high when I had to sit down and draft my article. And second, I've waited a long time to say this, so I'm going to start with my introduction. Good evening, new board president Claire Wilson, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Campbell. My name is Gary Robertson, and tonight I'd like to explain why voters need to vote yes for the EP&O levy, otherwise known as Proposition 1. When the voters passed the tech levy and the school construction bond, those were two major accomplishments. But the final one we must pass is this levy to renew the one that expires this year. This levy has been supported by voters for 27 years now, and will provide funding for another 4 years for positions such as teachers, nurses, and security staff. It represents 10% of the budget and makes up for funding gaps not provided by state funding, but hopefully which will be addressed once the legislature complies with the McCleary decision. As a paraeducator who works in the schools, I know how important these people are and how critical they are to ensuring that Dr. Campbell can accomplish her mission of her meeting her 5 strategic goals and providing a quality education for all our scholars. Another reason you should vote for this levy is that it is a win-win situation for taxpayers, as your tax rate will be reduced 37% starting in 2019, thus saving $570 annually. That is something that would be welcomed by any individual or family. Finally, I'd like to urge you to join teachers, parents, local businesses, community leaders, and me by voting yes on Proposition 1 and to continue to support Dr. Campbell and, most importantly, our scholars. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. We appreciate your support always. Thank you. All right, next up is superintendent comments. Dr. Campbell. Oh, excuse me. I went out of line. It's our scholar representative school reports, and I'm going to start to my left with Cedric.
So before winter break, schools were having spirit weeks leading into the winter break. And coming back from the winter breaks, the scholars who were not in a frenzy to get their grades up before the semester ends were moving at a snail's pace as they're getting back into the swing of things. Also, schools are planning Martin Luther King events in the school to celebrate the life and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and they're also raising awareness for racial discrimination and sexual harassment. Some schools are using advisory as a chance to do some community building activities to improve the overall morale of the school, and also some of the schools who haven't already had a winter dance are currently putting one together. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before I start, I just want to clarify that this update is in regards to the last few weeks scholars had at their schools before winter break. So starting off, scholars continually mention how it's been constant chaos making sure grades are up to par and ready to go before the semester ends. Aside from that, I consistently found that many scholars were actively participating in things such as assemblies and school spirit days. I'm glad scholars feel a sense of pride for their school and are taking the time to engage and assert themselves within their school community. Following that, in my last update, I mentioned the phenomenal ways that scholars took initiative to give around the holidays. With that being said, I would like to take the time to recognize Thomas Jefferson specifically. They held a toy drive and raised about $2,000 in over 300 toys. That's beyond astonishing, let alone, but they also took part in a program called Holiday Helpers, in which they provided holiday necessities to a local family. Their leadership volunteered time at one of the Federal Way elementary schools, and their club took part in the Kiwanis?
Yep.
Great. Cancer program, which brought people together to contribute toward an admirable cause. All in all, I believe that deserved to be recognized, so keep up the amazing work. Finally, as a closing remark, I just want to mention a quote that I really enjoyed from a recent book I read. It states how education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. With that being said, during exams and stressful times, such as the nearing of the end of first semester, it's important to remember that we are so close to the finish line, and we need to keep pushing, keep reading, keep studying, and keep working hard. But don't forget to sleep, eat, and live, because we've got this. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicely done. Thank you both. Now, Dr. Campbell.
So the two scholars have forced me now to go off script to say, we get the privilege to interact with this type of possibility and potential every single day. And unfortunately, you don't hear about the talent that we see, just two examples in Cedric and Michaela. But when you hear the brilliance, you know that our future is in good shape. And I just want to applaud you. These scholars read every week 30 to 40 reports written by the scholars on this superintendent's advisory. So they have to glean all of that, come up with a report. And on some boards, you'll see scholars on the board, but I don't know that they're all reading from reports from every school. So they really are representing the voice of students from every single corner of this district. And I couldn't be more proud to have you joining us and adding your perspective. I will also say that upcoming, the board will be interviewing for two new scholars to be on the board, and the bench is pretty loaded in terms of scholars that are on the superintendent's advisory, and I think you've set a really high bar. So you were the first, and just couldn't be more prouder of you. A couple of things that are going on around the district. We've had some school visits right out of the gate. I had a visit yesterday with Director Wilson, and another one today with Director Eto and Director Wilson. And I would say these board members could probably do a little bit of training on walkthroughs and what you're looking for. Both Hiroshi and Claire are very knowledgeable about what instruction looks like, as are all of the board. But it's really I'm really proud to see the evolution of the board and understanding what quality instruction looks like. Today we were at a school, I think Director Wilson, you talked about the fact that you hadn't been in that school before, and that's what these school walks do. They get our board out in schools, but not just for what I call ceremonial kinds of things, but really looking at instruction, because we know that's how we're going to move the needle. Also, we're planning right now our mid-year school improvement plan checks. This is the first time we've done this. We do school improvement presentations in October, but now we're adding a mid-year check just to be sure that everybody is paying attention to the results that we're getting. We've put a lot of work and effort into curriculum adoptions, professional development, principal PD, teacher PD, and we're really starting to hone in on what we know will make our results continue to increase. So we're looking forward to that. And board members, you're going to get more information about that so you can come in and observe what's happening across our schools. Also, I'm excited to say we are well on our way to beginning the planning and building of our schools as the result of passing that $450 million bond. So TJ, Wildwood, Lake Grove, Mirror Lake, and Star Lake, along with, and I said Wildwood, the principal, scholars, as well as some of our central office staff, including Mike Benzine, Greg Brown, myself, Dr. Pfeiffer, we sat on a panel and interviewed architects. And later today, they're going to tell you the architect selections that these schools rigorously went about identifying. Also, we're getting ready to interview and select our construction firm. So those pieces are moving along, and we're going to be sure that the board is updated on those processes. I also want to talk a little bit about funding. You heard Director Gregory really give you some of the broad strokes. One of the specific things that I've been asked to do is to join a news group for an interview with the Seattle Editorial Board on Thursday. And at that time, I'll talk about what I see as some of the assets that happened as a result of the legislature moving to add more funding as a result of McCleary. But there are some tweaks and some other, what I would call ancillary things that need to happen to really make sure that some of the districts that we might not have gotten it right the first time, that we can do to revise it. And so that editorial board interview will happen on Thursday. And we were asked, I was asked to represent Federal Way Public Schools along with the news group to do that. So I've talked to several board members about it. I've talked to Tim Garshaw before he left to just make sure that our thinking is grounded in what's happening around us. And I'm hopeful that that we'll start to see some of those smaller things adjusted along with regionalization, as Director Gregory mentioned earlier. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you so much. Now we are moving on to school board comments, and I'll start to my left with Director O'Leary. Nothing tonight. All right. Director Eto.
Happy New Year to everybody. Good to be back from the winter break. Just wanted to point out that this year the Federal Way High School is working in conjunction with the City of Federal Way, the Diversity Commission for the MLK event. And in conjunction with that, there's a food drive that's going to be held at local grocers with the scholar representatives there as well to assist, Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And there's also going to be an event at the Federal Way Performing Arts Center, and there'll be a food drive deposit carton there as well. So if you're out and about, please support that effort.
So I just want to make sure you're aware that we have a levy. I think it's, Gary Robertson mentioned it. We have 5 weeks from tonight when it will be put on the ballot to vote for, and it is critical. It's 300 jobs. And it's actually 37 years, Gary, because it's 1980. So for 37 years, the community has supported it. I mean, you're asking why do we have, you just passed a bond. Well, bond builds the buildings, and the levy takes care of everything else, lights, teachers, paraeducators, nurses, security officers, all of those things. So please make sure that you're aware. If you have any questions, make sure you ask any of us to help you, but please support the bond when it happens on February 13th. Oh, levy, you're right, levy, thank you. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Director Gregory?
Well, I'm happy to report I just came back from vacation. It was great. It was sunny. But I would also like to reinforce the need for this particular bond, or levy. God, I'm as bad as everybody else. It's one of those damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of situations that we're in right now. We have no choice in order to maintain the school district at the level of learning that's going on right now for us to participate one more time in a levy that will not be at the level in the future, but we have to do this in order to sustain what we have. And yes, we just passed a bond, and the legislature just did some funding, and all of this is important, but there's one more step, unfortunately, that we still have to face as that funding level at the state rises. We're kind of in that interim situation and would certainly hope that people would seriously consider what's put forward in February and support it. Our students have benefited from a lot of very hard work in the last 2 years, and we want to continue that. So anyway, if there are questions, again, I would agree, call the district office if you've got questions, and we'll be happy to get you answers or show you data if you need to know exactly what all this means. It's rather complex, but it's real, and it's a hard one for people to figure out. But thank you for the effort of supporting us to this date, and encourage everybody to continue that one more time.
Thank you, Director Gregory. I'll say that I'm in total agreement, and our scholars are deserving of every bit of the levy funding that we're putting forward, and it is always thinking with scholars at the center of everything that we do. And I can't see anything more than that, other than I'm looking forward to the support of our community to make sure that we continue to support the levies that are put out there. City Council has a new look to it, and I had the pleasure of going to the swearing in, and I look forward to our work together as two bodies. I don't think we've ever actually done a lot of formal work as two bodies of school board and city council, and we have been meeting together to put some plans together to see how we can make sure that the work we do and the work the city does is in support, again, of the families and the scholars in our community. So I look forward to working together and lay some things out as we're able to plan ahead. Also wanted to just thank the Federal Way Cares for Kids group, and if you've never been to that event or seen that event, there's a Friday night setup that takes a long time to set up. All day Saturday, there's volunteers from all over the community that come together and serve our families in a way that's so respectful and leaves them feeling as if there's a larger community that cares about them and their families. So always happy to be part of that, and I just am proud to be part of a community that cares for families in that way. I did do two school visits this week, and I just wanted to thank both Olympic View and Enterprise, the two places that we were able to see. And Olympic View had an incredibly vibrant community that morning when we came in, not only the scholars, but many, many families around. I learned a couple of new things, and one is PTR, physical touch response, was in I think, a first grade classroom. And the scholars were learning about their learning target for the day, and illustrations was one of the words, and PTR is using a physical body response like illustrations to help their body and their mind remember the concept and the words. And I never quite seen a teacher with such fluidity use that, and so that was really quite interesting. Also, the learning targets and anchor charts, which Dr. Campbell talked about, abounded in every classroom that we saw. So not only do scholars know what's happening and what's expected and what it is that they're learning, I think as families come through, they also have a greater understanding of what their young people are learning and how perhaps they may be able to support that as well. I was also excited that community partner SmileMobile was at Olympic View, and SmileMobile provides dental screening for young children free of charge for families, and it was an awesome thing to have there, and I know there are many, many families in our district and our community that lack support for dental care, and so things like that I think are just, again, whole child related and in support of our district goals. I guess two other things is one is a shout out to Communications for the Scholar Chronicle, and I'll say that I had an opportunity over the break to be in my neighborhood, and I have an older gentleman that's my next door neighbor who's a grandpa, and he said, you make sure next time you see that superintendent to tell her how good this thing is, as he's shaking the Scholar Chronicle. So really feeling in our neighborhood at least that there's some communication going on and people are really truly understanding not only the issues of the district but the great things that are happening. So I think, again, in support of the levy, those are all things we can do to keep moving that support forward. And the last thing I'll say to our scholar reps is, as Dr. Campbell said, you have bright futures, and I hope you might consider thinking about running for school board or any other elected office in the near future once you're done with your studies. And I have a did you know, and that is, did you know that the Fife's deputy mayor is a graduate of Federal Way Public Schools? With that, bond update, Dr. Campbell.
So I'm going to invite Greg Brown, one of our consultants, along with Mike Benzine, up to give you an update on our architect selection for the projects at TJ, Wildwood, Star Lake, Mirror Lake, and Lake Grove. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you. Do we have the presentation up?
Yes, it should be on the desktop. Do you see it?
Okay. Here we go. Sorry. Looking for a mouse.
James, do you mind, or
I
someone?
don't see a mouse.
It should be in the tray below, if you can slide it out.
Oh, it's on the back.
Oh, okay.
Is it on the back table, I think? Right behind you.
Or, yeah, just help him pull it up, too.
Hey, we're live. All right. Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Campbell, President Wilson, members of the board. Tonight we would like an opportunity to update you on the progress of our capital bond program. We would like to share with you where we are in the bond program, the details of the architect selection process, and what's coming up in the near future. And so at this point, I'm going to let Greg start us off.
Thank you, Mike. So this timeline that you see up on the screen and in your packets is similar to the one that you saw a few weeks ago when we presented some initial information on the timeline. This version is a little more simplified than what you saw the last time. And what we're trying to show you is where we are today. We're in the planning stage of the first 5 projects. It was decided that because of the way the cash flow works with the projects, and we don't want to saturate the construction market with a whole bunch of projects at the same time, we thought it'd be best to try to spread the projects out but we identified that the greatest need right now was in elementary school capacity. So we moved the elementary school projects to the front. And then also the high school, because of it's such a large project and we're keeping our eye on project inflation, being that it's such a large project, the effect of inflation will have much more of a dramatic effect on that project being such a large project.
Right.
We thought we better have that one at the beginning too. So that's where we are right now on the schedule. And the pre-design phase includes the architect selection process. Oops. Mike, you're much better at this than I am.
Here, let me help you.
Yeah, do that. There you go. So the process that was used was a 3-phase process. It's similar to a job interview that maybe someone interviewing for a project in Federal Way. The first process would be submitting your statement of qualifications, so like an application. And then I'm going to go into detail about how each one of these phases worked. The second phase was the interview process, and then the third phase was reference checks. Each one of those phases had 100 points maximum, and the total, the firms getting the highest total out of that 300 points were to be recommended to Dr. Campbell. Okay, thank you. So the first phase, request for written qualifications. This is actually for architects and certain consultants that are doing work with a state of Washington agency, including school districts. It's a requirement that you advertise in a local paper and a second paper of a certain circulation. And so these two papers were picked because they have an appeal not only locally but to the Puget Sound area. The advertisements were done, and then a pre-submission meeting was held for interested firms in October. There was quite a large turnout. We filled a very large space down at the facilities building. I was impressed with the number of companies that came that were interested to work for Federal Way School District. And remember, this was before the bond was even passed, so there was an interest even before the money was assured to pay for the projects. The submissions were due November 2nd, and we received 10 submissions for Thomas Jefferson High School and 12 submissions for the elementary school projects. Again, a good turnout, made our process a little more difficult because we had more firms to look through to make some shortlisting recommendations. The statement of qualifications were reviewed and scored by a committee. That committee consisted of Federal Way people, staff members is what I meant to say. A peer district person was involved, and then some people from my team were involved. The vast majority of the people on that team, though, were Federal Way School District people. 4 finalists were approved and moved forward to Dr. Campbell for a recommendation to her for the high school project, and 5 finalists were forwarded for the elementary school projects. At this point, I just wanted to remind you that of the 5 finalists forwarded for the elementary school projects, it was determined that it would be better for the district if 2 of the schools were grouped together for one architect, and then 2 other schools were grouped together. I'm sorry I'm not choosing my words carefully here. I'll try to do better. But it just makes sense, since the schools will all be designed to the same standards, that we would limit the number of architects so that we wouldn't have 4 different architects competing to outdo each other as far as the designs go. We'll talk a little bit more about how this process will work in the future, but the idea is they'll all be based on the same recipe or ed spec, but the designs, at least the way they should go, is they should reflect the community that the building is in, so that each community can celebrate the design that they have, yet each school will also be built around the same parameters, so no one has something better than someone else.
That's our equity guideline, and the board is fully vested in ensuring that we operate with equity. So thank you for bringing up that equity guideline.
Great. The shortlisted firms were notified November 17th to move on to the interviews. Again, Dr. Campbell was part of that process, making sure that the firms that were recommended were firms that would be the right ones suited for Federal Way School District. Then we move on to the interviews. There's a committee of community members, school staff, district staff, and scholars. I'm excited tonight that we're going to hear from not only some of the staff members, but from some of the scholars. I've participated in interviews before with student scholars, and there was an exceptional representation from this group here.
Incredible.
Probably the best that I've ever worked with. So, I mean, some of the comments that were made were like, boy, they were taking better notes than we were. So it was pretty neat to hear them. And to do direct quotes from what was said in the interview meant to me, and I know to other members of the committee, that they were serious about their role on this committee, which I've never seen it to that degree before. So I was really proud of them. The interviews were independently facilitated by...
Excuse me. Before you get too far along, I know Mike Benzine works for the school district. I think it'd be a good context to understand what your role in is and who you represent.
Sure. My role or Mike's role?
Yours, Greg.
Okay. So I'm on the second bullet point. I'm the independent person that facilitated the interviews. I was not a voting member. I was there to make sure that the process was fair between each interview and that all the same questions were asked the same way and that there was consistency between the interviews. I was hired to come in and do that task specifically.
And I will just add to that, I worked with Greg in another district where he led efforts around a bond over a period of 8 to 9 years. And because of his expertise, and we don't have that expertise, so he doesn't work for any of the firms. He doesn't work for any of the architectural firms. There was no conflict there. We just needed some bandwidth that he was able to give us.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, I come from Spokane, so I don't have a vested interest in any of the firms from this area too. So,
Yeah.
but I know of people through my professional associations, I know what the quality of work they can produce. So thanks for asking that question. The high school interviews occurred on November 29th, and the elementary school interviews occurred on December 1st. Again, the questions were pre-prepared and consistent between the interviews. What we did is we led the committee on a group score. So they filled out their own individual score sheets, but at the end of the interviews, we all got together and we agreed on a group score for each company. And I was amazed again at how easily it was to find consensus in this group. Everybody had a voice. They all got to explain how they felt. But I think in the end, everybody got either their first choice or their second choice, and everybody got their first choice. Dr. Campbell was again part of the process. We made some final recommendations to her. She made some adjustments, and I think the final recommendations are as good, are great. The third part was the reference check. We don't have a slide for that, but basically after we concluded the interviews, we just wanted to verify with some of the customers that these firms that we were recommending had worked for previously, that they were as solid as their reputations stated, and we found that they were all solid. So there really wasn't anything distinguishing in the reference checks other than it confirmed what we already knew about those firms.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. So as you can see, our interview panel members were comprised of a wide range of our stakeholders. And because selecting the right architect is a cornerstone for a successful bond program, we really wanted to include the principals, our scholars, our community, our teachers, and our administrators, and adhere to our guiding principles that were previously established during the Facilities Planning Committee. And so as you can see, we had all of the principals for the first 5 projects were present. We had our 2 scholars, and as Greg had indicated, their interaction was phenomenal. I was very impressed with their skill and interpretation and listening, because those interviews it was an all-day process. And so they did a great job. We also had 5 community members, which included our parents, PTA members, and volunteers. And then we had our teachers, our certificated staff, some coaches, and our classified staff represented also. And last but not least, we had 2 LIOs. Our chief academic officer was present for the high school, and myself. So we really had a very good, diverse group. And now at this point, I would like to welcome our principals and scholars and let them briefly share with you the process that they went through and some of the comments. And so first up, we would like to ask for our principal of Thomas Jefferson High School, Principal Chacon. And the scholar that's with her is Angel Swampy. Thank you.
Good evening. Am I announcing or just talking about them? Yes, okay. So for Thomas Jefferson High School, Bassetti is the company that we are recommending. I will tell you a little bit about the process itself. We had 4 wonderful companies to look at, and it was so enjoyable to see the different perspective of each one of the areas, how they came from that and what they brought to us, and the ideas are already flowing, and I'm just so excited I can't even tell you about this next process. Bassetti specifically, though, they are a truly seasoned, knowledgeable company. They have lots of experience. They blew us away with examples of some of the schools that they have done in the past and the possibilities that they were opening up to us about what they could do for Thomas Jefferson. They had a focus on school safety, while honoring the natural beauty of our campus and our local community as well, trying to bring to life some of the trees that we have all over, keeping it green looking, but in a place where students want to learn and be a part of, since they're there most of their day. They seem to understand the importance of providing spaces to come together and celebrate different styles of education techniques. And as we're moving forward and education is constantly changing, the possibilities of a building are so important. Not limiting before the students even get in there. So that was a very exciting thing to see. There was one question, problem-solving question, which I think blew all of us away on the panel when you saw the way they processed. They are a true team, and they're used to dealing with challenges. They sat down, they immediately started processing, and to be able to watch that happen, I know that they are more than capable and very excited to take on any challenges that come up during this process. And I look forward to working closely with this team because they really know how to make things happen and how to make changes in the midst of some chaos that will be coming. I know they're more than ready to take on this challenge, and I look forward to seeing what they do as they help develop a facility that embraces and celebrates 50 years of tradition and pride at Thomas Jefferson High School. And we look forward to working closely with Bassetti in the future and welcome them to our TJ family as we move into that future. Now I would like to introduce one of our scholar representatives that served on that interview committee, Angel Swami. She blew us all away, along with our other scholar that was there, but I want her to share a little bit about her reflections of the team and the process as well.
Good evening. My name is Angel Swami, and I am a scholar at Thomas Jefferson High School, and I'm here and proud to congratulate Bassetti for getting the opportunity to work with our school. Let me start by saying that they had an amazing presentation that was presented to us, and I'm very excited to see what they have in store for remodeling Thomas Jefferson High School. As a scholar, I know it's important to have a school that you're comfortable at, a safe learning environment, and lastly, a place you look forward to coming to every day. I'm sure our student body would feel the same. One thing that I know would help achieve the school is the input of the students, and I feel like that's very important. I also wanted to point out a few pointers that I really appreciated, such as the communication plan with our scholars to include them in the process of building our school, all of the emergency and safety issues that have already been planned out to keep everyone safe, especially our families in the neighborhoods. And lastly, the plan to make accommodations if needed, if people or anything in the process, to make the process a bit smoother. I'm sure we all want nothing but the best, and I can't wait to looking forward to our new Thomas Jefferson High School.
Thank you.
Angel, you were absolutely incredible in that interview process. Your attention to detail, you had all those notes that you had taken, you kept going back and forth. I was absolutely blown away by your skill. Thank you for your
Thank you.
expertise.
Thank you.
Okay, and then next, we would like to bring up our principal, Doug Rutherford, for Integris.
Well, thank you for the honor and the opportunity to be a part of the interview committee. I was one of 3 members of the Lake Grove family. We had a parent as well as a scholar. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here today. They'd rather go to a wrestling match at Lakota. But I was impressed with all 5 of the firms. It was a very hard decision to rate them 1 through 5, but we're very excited that Integris was selected for Lake Grove because we did hear and see a firm that we believe would do an outstanding job in making Lake Grove a culturally inclusive and welcoming facility. The Integris firm impressed us with their problem-solving skills. When they were given the task of designing, they got right to it, and you could see that this was something that they did every single day. The Integris, they impressed us with the focus that they would have on developing scholars in our schools for teaching and learning spaces that required flexibility and adaptability for the needs and the vision of the Lake Grove community. They talked over and over again about how important it was to involve the community, to make Lake Grove a center of our community. They would attend family events and just get a feel for the culture of our building. They had expertise in early learning, as one of our visions is to have a school that really helps support our preschoolers, and they have done a lot of work in that area. And safety and security, both inside and outside the buildings. The Integris firm promised to work with our scholars, staff, and community to identify and prioritize our needs and vision to develop an excellent building. They stated, the better we know you and the closer we work with you, the better we'll be able to develop overall goals for Lake Grove's learning environment. So we look forward to working with this wonderful company to develop an educational facility that will make our community and our school district very proud. So thank you.
So really quickly, this is Doug's last year. He's announced that he's retiring. I begrudgingly accepted, I refused to accept it last year, and he gave us 1 more year. He's assured me that there won't be any of that this year. But I want to thank you for at least getting the school off, helping us to pass that bond, and starting it off and handing off the baton, and for your incredible service. You're welcome.
Before I bring up Principal Schwartz, I also want to remind or bring to light that our scholars that participated in these projects may not ever get an opportunity to attend that school by the time we finish that project. And they had mentioned that and the seriousness of it and how important it was to make sure that it gets started with their involvement and continue to bring scholars in along the way. Next, I'd like to bring up Principal Schwartz, and he has a guest. He has Raheel Chand is our scholar, and Rahil's father, Lloyd, was a participant in the interview process also. Go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Super proud to be able to talk to you a little bit about the process. It was really amazing to be there for that day and to see the presentations and to just hear what everyone had to say, what the architects had to say, and how in tune all of them were with education and the needs of our scholars and our community. I'll echo everything that everyone else, that Adrian and Doug said, and kind of focus on two things that I think were particularly impressive. And one was that the firm McCranahan really impressed us with their communication and how they were going to communicate with staff, with students, with the community, how they were going to set it up to gather feedback, and how they were going to really ensure that what this new Wildwood was the center and the hub of the community for our scholars. And it was really impressive. The other thing that really impressed us was how in touch they were with safety, and how they really were in tune with understanding that this was something that was happening would likely be built while we were there, and that there were students and scholars, and that there were needs that would come along with that. And there was even mention of how scholars might be involved in that process. And I'm not sure if it was them, but one of the architect firm talked about having like a foreman for a day where a scholar could wear a hard hat and go and just see it and check it out. And it was just, the whole process was amazing. And I think Doug said all 5 of them were wonderful, and it was a really hard process, but we're super excited to have McCranahan work with Wildwood and excited to welcome them to the Wildwood family. I'd like to introduce Raheel Chand, who will probably much more eloquently talk about the process and his role. And Raheel is one of those scholars who won't be at Wildwood by the time the project is done, but I think his sister will, so she'll be able to tell him about it and maybe do a little bit of that. All right, you're on.
Good evening. My name is Raheel Chand, and a few things I liked about the interview process is one thing I liked about it is that how we got to see what they built, like all the firms and what they built before they were gonna build our school, and also how we everyone got a limited time to share and no one, and it was fair between all the firms.
The other person who was involved and represented us is Lloyd Chand, Raheel's dad. And Lloyd was actually a part of the facilities planning committee before he became an employee at Wildwood. So he kind of has done that whole process and seen Wildwood as a parent and as an employee, and now through this process. So I don't know if Lloyd wants to say anything or if he feels like we're good. So we're good, and we're excited at Wildwood to welcome McCranahan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It was very exciting. It's one of the fun things that we really get to do. So now I'd like to back up just a little bit and talk, kind of refresh our master schedule. All of our projects are listed on the master schedule. However, as Greg had mentioned, we're just starting with the first 5. And what you'll notice in the slide here is that there's 4 colors across it, and each one of those represents a phase. And so the first is our planning, or what we call our pre-design phase, and then the second is our design phase, and then the third would be our construction phase, and that following that is when we occupy the big move-in. And so currently, we're still in the planning and the pre-design phase, but we're moving rapidly. And as we move, there's still a lot of work to be done prior to getting into our design phase. And so I'm going to share with you some of the next steps. And what I also want to say is that some of it starts to blend together in certain areas, and we wind up working very hard to try and keep it moving on a steady pace to make sure that we don't waste any duration or extend this project any longer than it has to be. And so our next steps, right there, our next steps is going to be to begin our contract and fee negotiation with the approved firms. And this is where we identify the specifics regarding the projects and the negotiation fee with our architects, excuse me. And those specifics include the size of the schools, size of the buildings, the scope of the work and the schedule, and then, of course, the fee. And this will also be the area, the time where we will take the opportunity to use the fee recommendation guidelines from OSPI. And basically what that does is that ensures that Federal Way is not paying any more than our neighbors did during their construction process and their fees. I'm sorry, for their fees of their construction process. And the next is going to be our formation of our project design steering committees. And much like our facilities planning committee and our interview panel, the design steering committees will allow all of our stakeholders to come together once again and voice their opinion during the design of these schools. And that will be done through a series of different types of meetings, design charrettes. We'll have multiple ones. Dr. Pfeiffer is going to be helping us move through this portion. But like I said, it's going to include our staff, scholars, community members, principals, teachers, classified staff, and that's where we'll discuss and review the design aspects. Next is going to be our part of our pre-design, our planning phase, is where we create and develop our educational specs. And the educational specs, the way it was defined to me, and it just makes good sense to me, is it's a written document that outlines a menu of our design elements that fulfill our educational needs and goals. And it also helps us build consistent and similar products that support those goals. They don't look alike, but they operate alike. And so
and a lot of these details we'll be doing monthly updates for you as we get into these phases to give you more details about it.
yeah, there's a lot to chew on here.
Yeah.
And then lastly, it's the completion of the work that we started about a month and a half ago, which is our district standards and best practices. And so on that note, these are the architects that we recommended to Dr. Campbell to proceed forward with. So for Thomas Jefferson High School, we have Bassetti Architects. For Lake Grove and Mirror Lake Elementary, we recommended, the panel recommended Integris Architecture's firm. And Star Lake and Wildwood Elementary, we recommend McGranahan Architects. And so with that, I would like to give you an opportunity for any questions or concerns.
One question that I know a board member posed to me that I thought we could ask the whole board is how do we ensure through our process that we're getting the best bang for our buck? And so in other words, the GCCM process that you talked about, can you explain the difference between that? Because we're not doing it right now, and I know when I call around, other districts are doing it. So Greg, can you talk a little bit about that?
Go ahead, please.
So the traditional way of doing a public project is you solicit bids based on a set of plans, and then you get contractors to bid on your documents, and the low bidder gets the work. May not necessarily be the most qualified contractor, but they got the bid because you have to accept the low bid. GCCM is an alternative that the state has approved where you go before a board that the governor has approved, and this board has a subcommittee, that's actually the committee you go before, and as a district, you can ask them permission to use this alternative system. Once they give you that permission, you solicit contractors, and then you must, much like we've just done with the architects, we choose from a short list, or we shortlist a few contractors that we feel are the most qualified and the best able to do our project. And then we allow them to bid their overhead and profit to make things simple. Based on the combination of the score of their interview, their statement of qualifications, and their fee proposal, the highest scoring firm gets the award, and then you negotiate a contract with them. Once you do that, they are involved with you at the beginning of the project during the design phase. They help you make design decisions. will this method of construction cost more, or will this method of construction cost more? Is it faster to do this one because we're worried about our schedule, or is it faster to do this one? Once we get that process wrapped up, then they will bid out all the subcontracting packages. So they'll bid out the earthwork and the electrical and the ceiling tile and the toilet fixtures. So it's still kind of a, you get to pick the guy that you, or the firm, the group of people that you want in charge of the project. However, the subcontractors are still chosen on a who gives you the best price. So you get the best of both worlds. So maybe just quickly clarify, if I was going to remodel my house, would I just get bids and from people I don't know and say, I'm going to pick the lowest bid, or would I try to ask people that I knew had a good reputation in the community to come in and work on my house? And I may not necessarily want to pick the lowest one. I want to pick a combination of the best price with the best qualifications because I want it done the right way. And so much more so when we're dealing with taxpayer dollars, we want it done the right way. So that, in a nutshell, is why there's an advantage of GCCM. Some people have asked, does it cost more to do GCCM? It's not necessarily costing more. It's a matter of who do you want to place the risk on. If you're going with the low bidder, there's a good chance that the district is going to take the majority of the risk. If you pick a contractor that is based on a set of qualifications that you've approved and pick the best qualified contractor, does the risk go to the contractor? No, but the risk gets distributed so that the district isn't in the worst position, they're in an equal position. And the other neat thing about GCCM is because the contractor's involved during the design, if when you're building the building, they go, oops, we forgot that we should have had that in there, that becomes their responsibility to fulfill that. So in the other scenario, if they forget, they might argue, well, I didn't have it in my bid, so you're going to have to pay extra for it. So.
Is this affected by prevailing wage?
These projects are all
prevailing
wage projects, yes.
And I think, Director Etto.
So my question, I guess, isn't really about the construction contractor, but the management of the contract. And the way you portrayed it at the end there, you almost made it sound like it's design build where they have the full responsibility. But if you've got a designer and then you got a contractor who's separate, it doesn't seem like the contractor would take the responsibility for the mistakes of the designer. But my original question had to do with the construction management aspect.
Okay.
So is the architect your construction manager for the owner, or is it the construction company that's overseeing themselves on behalf of the owner, which I would have a little bit of concern with?
On a simple, if you were doing one project, it might make sense to have the architect be the construction manager for that project, which is the traditional way. But because you've got such a large project, I would recommend that you hire an independent company that works directly for you to manage the entire bond. And there would be a third party involved. That's pretty typical. That's what Seattle School District would do. It's what Lake Washington's doing. It's what Highline School District, to your neighbor, is doing as well. Tacoma School District does it as well. It's pretty typical for very large bonds to do that. If you're doing just one project, like I said, you could probably hire an architect to do that for you.
And Board, I think we will, this is an information tonight, and then we'll be voting actually on the contracts as they're created and as they come through as a board. So.
There was one other thing that I thought I'd bring up when I was watching those slides. I didn't realize it, but Dr. Campbell knows this. All three of those firms were our top 3 picks on each of the projects. Mm-hmm. So when it got down to it, we had to say, okay, who likes these firms better? Who likes, because for instance, Integris and McGranahan were the second and third choices for the high school. So these 3 really came to the top. And so that tells you, again, the consistency of the selection committee on their opinions and the quality of the firms that you're getting if they were scoring that high amongst the group. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to do something kind of odd. So we're transitioning into a work study, so I'm going to officially close this board meeting, and then we're going to take 5 minutes to kind of reconfigure because we have some paperwork to pass out. You're more than welcome to stay for the work study, where we'll be getting a report out on ENS 2, a presentation on ENS 2, but also realize you may have other places to go at 7:20 tonight. So also our scholar reps, we'd like to be able to excuse you if you're so inclined. So I will call this meeting adjourned, and we'll come back in 5 minutes to work study.